Hi, Jonathan.
Hey, old mate, you all right?
Not too bad, not too bad. Hopefully, next year we'll can meet in person.
Yeah, it'd be nice, won't it?
Exactly. I'm going to just clock camera because I've got to make a quick call before the meeting starts. Hi, Jan.
Hello.
Okay, welcome everybody. I'm hoping that you can see me. I can see a fair number of you. And I just want to say a very warm welcome to our annual members meeting for 2020-21. I know that this is quite strange because we would normally have held this members meeting face to face, but because of the various restrictions that we have as a result of the pandemic, we're having to do this via Teams, but we're also live streaming this on YouTube. So if I can just do a few housekeeping rules first, please, that would be really helpful. So if you're on Teams, this meeting will be recorded. If you're unhappy about being recorded, I would suggest you dial out. And if you go onto the YouTube channel, you can follow the meeting on the live stream. If you're quite happy about being recorded, then obviously you're more than welcome to stay on the Teams link that you've probably dialed in on. I know we've got quite a number of people who have said that they wanted the link, so that's really good. Could I ask that those who are not speaking, those who are not members of the board, could you keep your microphones off and could you keep your cameras off? Obviously, you will still be able to see us. So the board members, if you leave your cameras on so people at least can see us, that would be really helpful. So I think that's the housekeeping rules over and done with. So again, a very warm welcome to everybody who has joined us. What I want to do is just first of all submit an apology. So Richard Mills, who is one of our non-executive directors, is on leave at the minute. So you have all the rest of the board members present on this call, but Richard is on your annual leave, so he does send his apologies. So as I say, under normal circumstances, we would have been having this meeting face to face, and obviously that's very much more conducive to having a conversation. Unfortunately, that's not been possible this year, but I'm hoping that the agenda that we have and the fact that we're going to hear a number of presentations, you will find the content of this meeting interesting and informative, and you will hear about what we've been doing as an organisation during 2020 and 21. So 2020 and 21 has been an extraordinary year for everybody, not least of which NHS health and care staff. And I would just like to start by thanking all of our staff, both those that work at Sheffield Health and Social Care, but also our wider colleagues across Sheffield and across the country for the sterling efforts that they've made during this last 12 months, which has been really, really challenging. So I just want to put that on record. So can we just put the agenda up, and I'll just quickly take you through what we're going to cover today. So I'm going to quickly do a members update. We've then got Terry Proudfoot, who is our lead governor, who's going to tell us about what's been going on in the Council of Governors. Then our chief executive, Jan Ditheridge, is going to reflect back on 2020 and 21 and also talk about our priorities and the things that we're going to be concentrating on in the future. We've then got a brief presentation from the Sheffield Treatment and Recovery team. We're going to talk about quality and our quality accounts. So Mike Hunter, our medical director, and Beverly Murphy, our deputy chief exec and director of operations, is going to talk about some of those quality issues. We've got to talk to you about the money, and the money is important. So we will hear briefly from our finance director about how we've managed the money, which is a large amount of public money that obviously is vested in our guardianship every year. And Phil will talk about that, but we'll also hear from our external auditor in terms of how he's assessed how we've managed the resource over the last year. Then we'll have Linda Wilkinson, who will talk to us about the clinical and social care strategy. And then we'll have time to respond to the couple of questions that have been submitted to us. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to take questions as part of this meeting, but people were asked to submit questions. We have received a couple, and we'll respond to those at the end of the meeting. And then if anybody else wants to ask questions, then after the meeting, if you'd like to submit them to us through our website, we'll be more than happy to respond. So hopefully that's a very quick counter through what we're going to do. So can I just start by introducing the board? So my learned colleague back in the office is operating the slides for us. So this is our board of directors. We've got 5 non-executive directors and 5 executive directors. And we've also got Brendan Stone, who is an associate non-executive director. I'm not going to go through every one of them because they're all there. You can see their picture and there's a little caption underneath in terms of what their responsibility is in terms of being a non-exec, or what their executive responsibility is. But that's the team that's responsible for running and leading this organisation, with, of course, Jan Ditheridge as our chief executive and me as the chair. We also have a new non-executive director, Yinka, who you can see in the second in from the bottom left. And Yinka is our new non-executive director, and she started with us 2 or 3 months ago now. So very warm welcome to her. So quickly moving on. I'm just going to do a couple of minutes just talking to you about the membership and the governor update. So if we can have the next slide, please. Our membership has stayed fairly static, and that's partly because we've not been able to really go out and do any membership activity because of COVID. So we have 11,500 members, and that's excluding the staff. We obviously have a community presence, and we work in partnership with other trusts. We target membership groups, and we hold membership events under normal circumstances. Unfortunately, this year, those membership events really, I think, have been non-existent because we haven't been able to run them. So the membership activity has been very, very curtailed this year. Moving on. So our Council of Governors is composed of these constituents. So we have a public constituency, we have a stakeholder constituency, a staff constituency, and a service user and carer constituency. So you will see we've got a large number of governors who sit on the council, and I'm not going to go through this slide, but you can see the areas that they represent, and their role is to engage with their constituents and bring the information, intelligence back to the council. And then the organisation, Sheffield Health and Social Care, our board works with the Council of Governors to really make sure that we take notice of what they're saying, that they influence our strategic direction. So they play a really important role. And you'll hear from Terry Proudfoot, our lead governor, in a few minutes, and she'll talk to you about some of the activity that the council has been engaged in during this last year. So next slide, please. These are the elections that have taken place between the 1st of April 2020 and the 31st of March 2021. So governors can stay for a period of time, then they might move on, they might resign, they might move, and we have to go out to elections. And again, without going through this slide in any degree of detail, these are the elections that have taken place during the period 2020 to 21. So that's very quickly the membership activity and the number of members that we have as part of our foundation trust. I'm now going to invite Terry Proudfoot, who is our lead governor, just to spend 5 or so minutes just talking us through some of the activity that the Council of Governors has been involved in. So Terry, I'm hoping you're there.
I'm here, yes.
Wonderful, thank you, Terry. So over to you.
Thank you, Mike, and good afternoon, everyone. This is a brief overview of what governors have been doing over the last year. Despite COVID and lockdowns, we have again had a busy year, although we have not been able to engage with our constituents as we would like to because, as Mike said, because of the restrictions to do with COVID. We've been performing our statutory duties, such as receiving the annual report. And together with the chair, we have recruited a new non-executive director, who you'll have seen on the slide, Dr. Yinka. The Council of Governors development work resumed, and governors have attended virtual workshops, including work on the roles and responsibilities of the Council of Governors, equality, diversity and inclusion, lived experience feedback, and a programme of induction for new governors. As part of this work, the Council have appointed a Deputy Lead Governor, Ben Duke, to assist with the work of the Council. The Council has been working on building relationships between governors and NEDs, and as part of this, governors are going to begin observing NEDs' work at subcommittees and on-site visits, which will also give a greater opportunity for governors to perform our role of holding NEDs to account for the performance of the board. Governors had an additional meeting with the chair this summer, so that governors had the opportunity to discuss their concerns following the recent CQC report, particularly the issues around Firs Hill Rise that it raised. Despite the pandemic and lockdowns, governors have continued to work with a commitment and dedication and perform their roles to the best of their ability. So I hope that's given you a bit of an idea of what we have been doing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Terry. That's really helpful. And I would just like to add that one of the focus that we've had over this last 12 months is to really look at how we can strengthen the role of the Council of Governors. Terry's talked about the development that we've undertaken with them to really understand how we can effectively engage together for the benefit of the service users that use our service. And that work will continue into this year. But the Council plays a really important role in a foundation trust. And we've been determined over this last 12 months to really strengthen that and make sure that we're getting the best advantage out of having those people available to us and to engage with us in the work that we do. So thank you for that, Terry. I'm going to move on now to ask Jan Dilleridge, our Chief Executive, to do a reflection back on 2021, but also I think to touch a little bit about where we're going this year. So Jan, over to you.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, I always find this quite a tricky one because under normal circumstances, looking back over the last year seems such a long time ago now at the rate that we work at. The pace of change over the last year for everyone, I think, has been quite significant. And doesn't it feel a long time ago since we were in that first lockdown in March 2020? That seems like years ago. At the beginning of 2020, the organisation, like everybody else, was finding itself dealing with a COVID pandemic and trying to understand what that meant. And also for this organisation, we had very, very recently over the end of 19 and as we went into 2020, received a full review with CQC, and they had rated our organisation as inadequate, and that had attracted a special measures rating, which meant that we had both COVID and some significant quality issues to deal with. Many of you who know me will know I was new into post in that March, and the team that you will hear from today were either new or have got very refreshed roles since that period of time. So a new team, new faces, and some quite challenging problems for us to tackle over that year. Next slide, please. So it was really, really important that we really grounded ourselves in why we're here, and why we're here. We revisited our vision, and that is to make sure that we're constantly improving our services to people with in our communities who require our services, and to improve the mental, physical and social well-being of our service users, remembering that we are an integrated organisation across health and social care. And when things get tough, our values become the most important things, don't they? We have just refreshed our values. Yesterday we signed them off at our board, but these were our values as they stood last year, and that have carried us through strongly through that period of time. So if there was ever a murky time that we weren't quite sure which way to turn, we went back to our values and made sure that we were holding those strong, and we must therefore be doing the right things. If you move to the next slide. So to make sense of that year, the board considered with everybody else in the organisation what are the most important things to focus on. Well, clearly our quality was really, really important, and getting back to good. Getting back to good is much beyond a rating, and it goes far wider than those services that were reviewed at that time. But it was also really, really important that we delivered on our CQC action plans, because they were the areas that most needed our help. Alongside that, we had to understand what COVID meant, what was emerging, make sure that we led and managed the whole process safely so that our service users and our staff got through COVID able to do their roles and safely. And then as we moved later into 2020, and early into 2021 it was planning for recovery, because things happened through that time, either that we learned we could do differently, or where there were occasions where we had to do catch up. And as we now know, many people in our communities have popped out with different challenges and issues following COVID, and some of those people will require our services in a different way. Then the other area that we needed to make sure we kept a good eye on, which relate directly to the quality of our services, was a range of things that we needed to transform, which included things like a new electronic patient record, which desperately needs changing and updating to make sure that we've got good digital records, that we need to move out of forward, which is where I'm talking from just now and won't be for hopefully much longer, so that we can release money to pay for our acute modernisation plans, so we can have new acute inpatient areas and other community services. We will continue to develop our forensic services, and very importantly, working in partnership with our GP colleagues, roll out the new primary and community mental health service, which is actually targeting a group of people whose needs we probably weren't meeting previously. So that was really, really important. All three of those things required our attention and focus, all supported by our aims and our values. Next one, please. So just to give you a sense of some of the things that we were doing, and I always think it's quite important, although we've put a picture of somebody in a bed here, 55,000 people that service users supported, and the vast majority of those are in the community. The vast majority of our beds are in people's own homes. They're not in our hospitals. It's a very small number of people who require an inpatient setting. So our staff work all over the city in all sorts of settings to provide high quality care. We've introduced apprentices across the organisation in all sorts of roles, giving a lift as an anchor organisation to people in Sheffield in their careers, but also enhancing the diversity of our own workforce, and ensuring that people have got a career pathway for the future with us. We've done lots of work in our estate. That was problematic because you remember that people weren't allowed to do building works at least in the first lockdown, and we had some really, really serious priorities that we needed to pay attention to. And we continue to work with our volunteers who we're really, really appreciative of. And as Mike said earlier, try to make sure that we maintain contact with our members while they were all shielding or isolated during this most of the last year. Next slide, please. Just a little bit about how we responded to COVID. We 200 command meetings. What does that mean? That on 200 different occasions we got together and made sure that we were following the rules, that we were implementing the guidance, and that changed on a probably twice daily basis in the early days, to make sure people had got the right kit, that we were troubleshooting to make sure that people were safe, able to work, and where we got hotspots because people were unable to come into work, that we paid attention to that. And importantly, we made sure that our service users were safe, because often they weren't able to access perhaps the information or the care that they needed outside in the community, so we often supported them to do that. We vaccinated 83% of our staff against COVID, and many tests. Our staff regularly test for COVID to ensure that both the teams and our service users are safe. Next slide. Going back to our priorities, I hope you can see why our challenges were, of course, the pandemic, our inadequate rating, our quality issues, and the fact that we were in special measures for quality was certainly a big challenge and continues to be so. Our staff survey results worry us and continue to worry us until we're sure that all of our staff think this is a great place to work. So that's unfinished business. although we have seen some improvements in some areas. And importantly, some of our environments where we provide care and where our staff work are well below standard. And that is certainly something within our staff survey that they talk about. Next slide, please. And some of the things that went well. Last year, we saw our flu vaccination rates go up from in the early 50s, 50%, up to 82%. So a lot more of our staff protected against flu last year, which also ultimately protected our service users. So that's a really good sign that we've got the right things in place to make that happen. We completed 91% of our CQC actions. The 9% I'm sure you're wondering about were those things that were outside or our gift or got delayed for a variety of reasons, but we do know about them, as do the CQC. A significant number of leadership changes, and we attracted some new people into the organisation, particularly around the board table, and actually changed some of the roles for individuals who've been here a long time that help them optimise their own roles. Importantly, recruitment of more experienced staff in our challenged areas, particularly our acute wards, where we found that there were quite a lot of fabulous but very junior members of staff having to hold too much risk and manage too much. So we put many more experienced staff around them. And 24/7 crisis access service came into play last year. Next one, please. So our performance, you can read that in our annual report, but there are a range of targets, and these are all national targets that we are required to meet, and we did. You can see those on the left-hand side, and there are definitely things where we've still got work to do. These are not necessarily national targets, but they are things that really don't make it a good experience for our service users or our staff actually, and they relate to waiting times and the amount of times we still have to send people out of Sheffield for an inpatient stay. That's not peculiar to Sheffield, it's happening all over the country. I'm pleased to say that's an improving picture. It won't get better completely until we've done all the work around our inpatient areas, because that's not helping, and until we've really transformed our community services, but it's an improving picture. Next slide, please. So that was 2021. I just thought it was just to take a moment to say what we've been doing. I'm pleased to tell you that CQC came back in March of this year, March, April, no, a bit later than that, probably May, June, and have now published a report saying that we have moved from inadequate to requires improvement, which we are of course pleased about. We recognise that we've still got much more to do, but we know we're doing the right things and moving in the right direction, and when you read the report you will see that they recognise that. We need to understand what sort of services people need post-COVID. We were having a conversation with one of our teams this morning who are now working with people who've got chronic fatigue post-COVID infection, and how they've had to change the way that they work to support that group of people who did not exist before COVID. So lots of things that we're doing to support people to work differently with our service users and meet their needs. And some of you will know, most of you will know if you live in Sheffield, that we had a very challenging report about our learning disability inpatient services, and we're committed to making sure that in the future for Sheffield and South Yorkshire we have a significantly improved service in that area. Okay, I think that's my last slide.
Thank you, Jan.
Thank you very much.
Can I just add to what Jan said, because it's when you sit down and you kind of go to events like this and you reflect back in terms of what's been achieved, but then if you actually look at the back cloth in terms of how we've delivered those achievements, you know, COVID has really taken its toll on everybody, hasn't it? But we've managed to deliver COVID, keep our staff and service users safe. We've managed to respond to the issues that CQC raised. We've managed to improve our position in relation to our CQC rating. Absolutely accepting, we're not there yet, there's still a lot to do. But again, I just want to thank the staff for everything that they've done. They've been magnificent. And again, some of those challenges, I think it's really worth just putting on record how impressive that has been. But we know we've got a lot more to do, and we will continue to do that together as Team SHSC. So thanks for that, Jan. What we're here for, of course, is delivery of services to our population, to our service users, to the people of Sheffield and beyond. And what we like to do with events like this is to have somebody come and talk to us about a real service. We're going to talk about the finances and the annual report, but to many people that's quite dry. And we want to really bring it to life in terms of what this organisation is about. So I'm pleased to introduce you to Adele Rawitz, who is the General Manager for the Sheffield Treatment and Recovery Team. And Adele is going to spend 5 or 10 minutes just talking to you about their role, what they've been doing and the changes that have gone on there. So Adele, welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm Adele Rowett. I'm the General Manager for Sheffield Treatment and Recovery Team. We provide support, advice, treatment for people around any substance, drugs or alcohol. We run from 2 buildings in the city centre. We've been part of this organisation for many years, but in April 2020, the 1st of April saw the start of our new contract, which brought criminal justice services from another organisation into Sheffield Treatment and Recovery Team. So as you can probably imagine, the 1st of April, TUPE in over 25 staff. Lockdown started on the 23rd of March. A huge challenge, particularly for new people joining the organisation, and the massive changes that we had to make it in the service around kind of reducing numbers in the building, making sure that service users were safe, etc. But we managed to keep our doors open, and we supported. We continue to support new people into treatment. We were also asked, not something that we were contracted to deliver, but as you probably remember, there was a drive to move people from the streets. So that saw a lot of people moving into hotels. So we worked very closely with some of the managers from the hotels around trying to manage some of the people, trying to get people into treatment, taking equipment out, supporting needle exchange in the hotels. So we were kind of travelling around the city trying to kind of support that, as well as kind of the influx of people that we did see want to come into treatment, particularly in the opiate service. So as you'll see from the total referrals, 2021, we had 3,500 people, compared to 4,068 in the previous year. But just on the cusp of that, as lockdown hit, we had quite a big spike in people coming in. And this year, what we know is that although we've had less referrals, people are staying in treatment longer, which is a good thing. We tend to have quite high referrals, but people then drop out of treatment and then cycle back round. So seeing fewer referrals and looking at where people are dropping in and out, we know that actually we've had less referrals because people are staying in treatment longer, and we think that's probably something to do with COVID. So the new contract brings a seamless integrated pathway for people in Sheffield, which now brings in the criminal justice element. So the hope is that the system will mean that people will be able to access treatment quickly, because we've removed a step where they would have been seen by another organisation, for example, in the courts or in custody, and then a referral through to us. That now kind of hits us straight away. We can get people straight into wherever it is that they need to be. So we've got recovery workers now in custody, in the courts, and we're not fully there yet, but prison in reach. So there have been some challenges for us, particularly around the criminal justice work, because when we took over the contract on the 1st of April, we weren't allowed to go into the courts, we weren't allowed to go into Shepcott Lane, into the custody suites, and we weren't allowed to go into prisons. So that part of the contract obviously saw kind of a lot less activity, which is not great at the start of a new contract. We're providing much more now outreach across the city. So we've got our needle exchange van that goes to various different places across the city, and we've continued to do that as well through kind of the lockdown and COVID. And we've had a significant amount of building work done across our 2 sites to improve the environments for staff and for service users. And as part of that new development, we've now got our own recovery hub. So that's a place where we're running groups from. We're running a breakfast club. So Greg's donate food. So we run a breakfast club each morning, and that's something that we've recently been able to kind of get back up and running. So there's all sorts kind of happening there. Not quite what we anticipated and hoped for in the future, because obviously we're restricted on what we're actually able to deliver at the moment. But we'd like to do a huge launch of the recovery hub. It's something that Sheffield or our service has never had before, and a fantastic opportunity for people that are recovering from substance misuse. And I'll stop there because I think I've only got 5 minutes. But if anyone wants to ask me anything, I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Adele. Just a comment from me. I mean, we know that drugs and substance misuse across all our communities, we just have to watch the news and what goes on locally, is a continuing issue. So it's something that, you know, we've just got to keep plugging away at, trying to get people into treatment. And really good to hear that you're retaining people in treatment longer. That's really positive. And I think as well, another good example of how you've had to adjust and adapt as a result of COVID and deal with getting homeless people off the streets. So, you know, it's another good example about how, you know, one of our services has had to adapt and change and respond to these challenges. So really well done.
Thank you.
Does anybody want to ask a quick question? I mean, it's difficult when we're all on Teams, but Jan?
Thanks, Mike. It was actually just a nod to Adele and the team in that through all of this, you also had to integrate all those staff that you talked about that TUPE'd over, and that's never an easy ask, is it? For people who are moving into a new organisation. I happen to go to all the inductions, and one of the questions at induction is, say something positive that's happened to you since you've been here, if you've been here a couple of weeks. And every one of those staff that I've come across, and I think I've seen you've sent most of them to induction, have said how welcome they've felt and how much a part of their team that they feel as they've been TUPE'd over into this team. And I think that's great leadership and a great team that have done that. So well done for that too.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Adele. I think we're going to move on. But once again, thank you for your leadership and thank you for that presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to move us on now, and I'm going to invite Beverly Murphy, our Executive Director of Nursing, Professions and Operations and everything else that she's got under her title and her wing, and Dr. Mike Hunter, our Executive Medical Director, to talk about quality in the quality account. So I'm not sure who's going to kick off, but over to you two guys.
Thank you, Mike. We're going to do a bit of a double act, as you say. So I'm going to kick off. Mike will come in the middle and then back over to me at the end. So thank you for that. It's a bit of a curious title, a quality account. So what a quality account allows us to do in the NHS is basically set out what are our priorities or objectives around quality for the coming year. So we're reporting today on the previous year's quality objectives. And as both yourself, Mike and Jan have said, it was a really unusual year to be setting our objectives. Unusual because we were in our very first year of a pandemic, and most of the formal reporting requirements that we ordinarily have for the quality account were stepped down. And also the way that we usually consult in terms of talking to our partners, people that use our services, our staff, that really just wasn't possible because of the pandemic. So a decision was taken that our quality objectives or priorities would sit very neatly, or rather track very neatly against our strategic priorities. And they were about getting back to good, getting through COVID safely, and delivering our transformation plans. And Mike and I just want to say a little bit about those three priorities. So 2021 was the beginning of getting back to good for SHSC. And we developed our team, we shared our vision, and we really did set the direction and developed our approach for how we would go about doing this. Our staff worked tirelessly in what were very difficult circumstances because of COVID, yes, but also because the outcome of the CQC inspection was difficult for people. And of course, they needed time to step back and reflect before they moved on and got on this journey of getting back to good. But we're now starting to see the rewards. We know that there's very much more to do, but we have set our intention and we are building on the foundations that we set last year, the year that we're reporting against. And some of the outputs of that were seen in Jan's slide. COVID was managed well in services. We did have a number of outbreaks of infection in our services, and every single one of those outbreaks was subject to an investigation, a serious incident investigation, so that we could establish what we could learn about how we managed that outbreak and what we might do better to protect people in our services, in our care, and also the people that worked in our services. I'm really pleased to let you know that we were visited by the regional lead for infection prevention and control, and he was assured that we had safe systems in place to control the spread of infection. I will note, however, that we did sadly lose a member of our staff, which was a real blow, and obviously that was looked at appropriately by the coroner, who didn't make any criticism of the way that we had protected our staff member at work. That was more than likely a community transmission. Working in COVID has become far more familiar for our teams, and we are really proud of them. But we know as we go into another winter and the year ahead, COVID hasn't gone away, and we're working hard to protect people, not least providing vaccinations. I'm going to hand over to Mike, who's going to talk a little bit about primary mental health care services.
Thank you, Beverly. Yes, because one of the things that the Quality Account needs to speak to is access to services, and because we know there are still some challenges in accessing some of our services in a timely manner, and because we were working to a priority last year about how we transform our services, I wanted to spend a couple of minutes on something that we did that was really innovative. We worked in partnership with Primary Care Sheffield, which is the organisation that draws together all of the GP practices in Sheffield, and the VCS, particularly Sheffield Mind, to put together a primary care mental health service in Sheffield as one of 11 early implementer sites in England. In the first year, which was the year that ended last April, we got this going in 4 primary care networks, ranging from the Foundry network around the Pitsmoor area in the north of the city, right down to the south of the city in one of the townships networks and a couple of networks in between. We contributed to the partnership a number of people from different professional backgrounds, psychologists, clinical associate psychologists, pharmacists, working alongside mental health nurses employed by primary care, and also community connectors, people helping service users just to sort of weave together all of those aspects of things that were happening in their lives that could be helpful, employed by Sheffield Mind and other VCS organisations. Over the course of the year, we saw more than 1,500 people, and these are people that otherwise likely would not have received a significant offer of care in that year. And Jan pointed out earlier on that this was something new and could help people who may have fallen between that gap that sometimes sadly arises between primary care and secondary mental health care. And this this project is all about filling that gap. You could think of it as taking the specialism of secondary care, but then really weaving it through primary care, that it gets really close to people in their homes and communities and so on. So more than 1,500 people, I would say, also from a really diverse range of backgrounds. Just looking forward, in the year that will end in April 2022, and of course we'll talk more about that next year, but it's just exciting to say, looking forward, we'll go from 4 to 6 primary care networks in Sheffield, and because of which networks those are, that will cover close to half the population of Sheffield, and we'll also be putting in place 12 workers into 12 more networks that are shared between primary and secondary care. So just to update you on a really exciting and an innovative piece of work that I'm sure is going to be a significant part of our future direction.
Thank you, Mike. The other transformation projects that we have worked on and delivered to some extent in year have also been our clinical and social care strategy, which we'll hear a little bit about later. Jan also noted that we need a new electronic EPR and we need to design a new acute facility. We've got more to do in that regard, but these projects are progressing, and our community mental health waiting times, again, has already been noted. We've got a little bit more to do. So the year ahead then, which we're now partway through, of course, we focused our quality objectives directly linked back to care. And we are focusing on reducing seclusion and restraint, improving accesses and outcomes in community services from a Black and minority ethnic community, and embedding co-production. These objectives, they'll take us time if we're going to deliver them in a meaningful way that makes meaningful change for people that use our services. And the intention is to focus on them over a longer term so that we've got a plan that really does bring about that change. And we will report that to our Quality Assurance Committee going forward, and look forward to talking to you more about that next year. But for now, Mike, that's the quality account.
Okay, thank you, Beverly, and thank you, Mike. Beverly's just mentioned there the Quality Assurance Committee. I mean, this is a really important area of our work, and one that we really focus in on. And much of the board's work is done via a range of subcommittees. And as Beverly said, we've got a Quality Assurance Committee, which is chaired by Sandy Keane, one of our non-executive directors. And that's the committee, the area where we get that leadership and that accountability into delivering the things that Beverly and Mike have talked about, and really making sure that we're anchored into, are our services high quality? Are they safe? Where do we need to make improvements? How are we listening to service users, and how we're listening to staff feedback? So, I just thought it was worth mentioning that we have those subcommittees, and quality is anchored into the Quality Assurance Committee, which is chaired by Sandy. So thank you for that. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to move us on. And now we've got Phil to talk to us about money. And sorry, Phil, I referred to finance being a little bit dry. It is, of course, very, very important. And we are given large amounts of public money that are vested in our governance arrangements. So it's really important that we're accountable back to the population in terms of how we've managed that resource. And this is the purpose of this conversation, and what you're going to lead us through. And then we're also going to hear from our external auditor as well. So over to you, Philip.
Thanks, Mike. As you say, we do have accountability in this area, but it doesn't stop it being dry for a number of people. So please bear with me. I think going on to the next slide, what we show here is a number of highlight figures for the organisation. And you can't explain the finances of the organisation without touching on what others have already said, because of course the money is a product of delivering services. Our funding and our expenditure have changed dramatically from previous years. Our income went up 22 million and our expenditure 23 million. And normally we'd want to spend a lot of time understanding this, but there are key drivers this year that explain a good proportion of that. COVID and getting through safely. £7.2 million of additional income and expenditure to help manage that, whether that be staff or PPE, as were highlighted on Jan's slides earlier. And similarly, we have had investments in services. The mental health investment standard has continued. So again, you took £5 million with additional investments into services. And we touched on earlier some of those other changes, like the Sheffield Start Treatment and Recovery Team. That was £0.7 million of additional income to support the delivery of that contract. So everything is a product of providing the services. We also had an increase in pension contributions of £4.5 million. I wouldn't normally bore people with that, but that's a significant change to our income and expenditure profile. So I'm not going to dwell any more on that. And again, our surplus, we plan to achieve, sustainability and break even in the NHS because of the financial regime and how things changed during the pandemic. We achieved an after finance cost surplus of 1.4 million. And again, we received £1.2 million in March as for money that we weren't able to spend. We were given not to spend it. That was a large slice of that surplus after finance costs. So it's not that we had money that we chose not to spend. Then focusing on the cash balance, we still have a strong cash balance, £62 million. For many people, for all people, a considerable amount of money. And that will help us support the delivery of our capital programme, and something we've started to see considerable expenditure as we moved in from 2021 to 2022. I'll talk a little bit about that from last year. We had revised capital plans because we all had capital plans leading into COVID, and then obviously we had revised plans. And we spent £7.4 million on capital expenditure, which is slightly above our revised plan during COVID, which is a turning point for the organisation in terms of delivering against its capital plans, and links back to what we talked about earlier about transforming our services, getting back to good, and investing in some of our estate that badly needed it. And Dovedale 2 is an example, and we will continue to do that in the current year and in future years to provide the right therapeutic environments for our service users and staff, both in inpatient and community estate. And then finally, just talk about the efficiency savings. We have efficiency savings to make as part of the NHS as we continue to strive to provide value for money for the taxpayer. And we achieved our £2.5 million target, albeit 1.6 million of that was through non-recurrent means, which I think is excellent delivery from an organisation going through a pandemic with much more poignant and real things to focus on, as well as efficiency savings. So I think that was excellent performance by everybody. I've talked briefly through the financial numbers. I'm not going to dwell on that anymore. What I will hand over now is to Rashpal, who will talk a bit more about the how and his view on whether we spent that public money in the right way, to the right standards, and to deliver value for money.
Okay, thank you, and welcome, Rashpal.
Thank you. So I'm Rashpal Kangura. I'm a director at KPMG, and KPMG have been appointed as your auditors for the past number of years, and that's following a procurement exercise. Ultimately, I'm responsible for issuing your opinion on the financial statements. So if we move ahead to the first slide. Thank you. There's two key areas of our responsibility that I just want to get across. The first is around financial statements audit. So those numbers that Philip talked about are from the financial statements, and our responsibility is to form an opinion on the financial statements in terms of whether they give a true and fair view of the financial performance and position of the trust, and make sure they've been properly prepared in accordance with accounting standards. Our second responsibility is regarding value for money. Here, our responsibilities have been confirmed are being articulated through the National Audit Officer's Code of Audit Practice, and that is that there's a requirement to assess whether there are any significant weaknesses in the trust's arrangements to achieve value for money. And we do that by looking at 3 specific domains. That's financial sustainability, your governance arrangements, and how you improve economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. So I'm going to talk through the outcomes of our work in these particular areas. So firstly, in terms of the accounts, well, we issued an unqualified opinion in 2021. Well, you might think, what does that mean? Unqualified means we are happy your accounts give a true and fair view of your financial performance, and they've been prepared in accordance with the applicable accounting standards. So ultimately, we're comfortable with the numbers that Philip has just talked to you about. We're happy they give a true and fair view of your financial performance position. Now, the audit is quite a long and lengthy process that involves a risk assessment, detailed work around the systems and processes used to produce those numbers, and ultimately a range of testing around those numbers. Now, we undertook our audit and we only identified some very small presentational changes to your accounts and disclosure changes to your accounts that your office has produced, and there was one significant recommendation regarding processing of purchase order authorizations. Now, in terms of it's probably difficult for you to gauge whether that's good performance or how well you perform there without perspective from other organisations. So I actually audit a number of other NHS trusts. So actually, in terms of my reflection on that particular aspect of the audit compared to other organisations, is that actually is quite good, because last year I saw a number of my NHS trusts, a number of more significant changes and adjustments. So it's good performance there. That takes us on to value for money. Now, in terms of value for money, I've talked about our responsibility here. Now, I must stress the findings and outcomes that I'm going to talk to you about really relate back to the CQC report issued in April 2020. So not the recent one that Jan has pointed to earlier in this presentation. So we've got to wind the clock back and think about what was happening during 2021. And what we identified was that, yes, you had an inadequate rating by CQC at the beginning of that period. You as an organisation put a number of arrangements in place, which included the well-led development plan and Back to Good programme. Now, we did see progress in that. However, a number of issues still persisted during 2021 that we felt that was a significant weakness, and we raised a recommendation around continuing to address the significant issues raised by CQC and monitoring progress to ensure that your response was having an impact. Now, clearly, I have to stress at this point, this is based on the April 2020 report and not the more recent findings of CQC, which Jan has mentioned, and you've made some progress there. So this will be an area that we will look at when we look at 21-22, and then we will be drawing upon the recent report from CQC, as well as looking what further developments you've made through your arrangements during the remainder of 21-22. So that's the outcome on the 2 key areas of our responsibility. Now, before I do close, I think it's important for me just to put on record our thanks to officers throughout the organisation who made themselves available for an audit. Whilst the audit can last a period of time from planning to final, the final period can be quite intense, and you can only complete that on deadline if you've got positive responses and cooperation from officers. So I'd like to put that on record. Thank you.
Thank you, Rashpal. That's good to hear. Sorry, I'm getting feedback. Can you switch your microphones off, please, if that would help? So thank you for that presentation. It's good to know that our financial statements are true reflection of what we do and how we do it and how we've managed that resource. And we absolutely accept that the value for money is linked to the CQC actions. And we are, as Jan's already mentioned, and we'll made reference to again, is that we will be focused on these. We've seen improvement, which is really good. We know we're not there yet, so we will continue that drive to improve even further. But just to remind you that in terms of the management of the money, I talked in quality about the Quality Assurance Committee, chaired by Sandy King, but we also have a Finance and Performance Committee, which is chaired by Richard Mills, and that's where we really get underneath the skin of the money, the finance, and really address the issues that have been raised and make sure that we can make those improvements. And we also have an Audit Committee, which is chaired by Andre, another one of our non-exec directors, and Anne works closely with the external auditors and making sure that we deal with those issues, and we have a robust audit programme to deal with some of these things. So just to remind you all that the board doesn't do all of this in its monthly board meeting. There's a real detailed piece of work which goes on in each of the subcommittees to make sure that we've got a real focus on this. Just before we move on, for any of you who are really interested in all the detail, you can get our financial accounts are on the website, so you can access them on the website. And you can also access a copy of our annual report as well for any of you who really want to get into the detail. But thank you to Rashpal and to Philip for that presentation. And I'm going to now move us on to the clinical and social care strategy. And I'm going to invite Linda Wilkinson to talk to us about the work that we've been doing in this area in the last period. Linda.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mike. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Linda Wilkinson, Director of Psychological Services, and I have with me...
Hi, I'm Jo Hemmingfield. I'm a co-production consultant working in the Trust, and I've got lived experience of using services.
Thank you. Could you move the slide on, please? Thanks. So this slide gives us an overview of the clinical and social care strategy. It's the first time that Team SHSC has developed a clinical and social care strategy that's sitting alongside some of the broader strategic aims that Jan, Mike and Beverly have already talked about. But you can see from the slide, we want to develop care that's centred around person-centred, evidence-led, trauma-informed and strength-based approaches. And to deliver this, we'll work with primary care, the city as a whole and across the broader ICS system. And we want to really move to a model that helps people to lead the best lives that they can, providing care that's recovery-based and creating models of care and services that really meet people's needs. We want to invest in our staff within Team SHSC, and this sort of sits alongside the broader strategy that Jan's already talked about around improving mental health, physical and social well-being for people that work in our communities. I felt very fortunate working in this strategy. We've liaised with and brought together over 400 people, service users, staff that work within the system and our broader partners, people that work across the Sheffield City Council, our broader commissioners, the university counselling services, Health Watch and our voluntary care sector communities. And it's been really important to us that we've focused on and really included what was very important to service users and staff and our partners, and really held the focus around making quality improvements and trying to reduce the health inequalities that we know are there. And there are several documents that we've drawn on, including the NHS long-term plan, to set the local direction for services for people with mental health problems, learning disabilities and autism.
One of the cornerstones of this strategy is how we heard from people who've used services and how we plan to continue to do this going forward. We know there's work to be done to strengthen the link between what service users tell us and the action we take. We found several different ways of hearing from service users, triangulated this information to create the heart of the strategy, what matters most to people, and how we can know we're making a difference. As we implement it, we'll keep asking and learning about what matters most to people and how we can know and make that difference.
The strategy defines a 5-year plan that includes key improvements that we expect to see each year as it builds as part of an iterative process. And we want to give you a couple of examples. So the focus for year 1 is around understanding what matters to people. We want to offer more mental and social care nearer communities, and Mike's already outlined the transformation programme, so I'm not going to say any more about that. But I think it's really important that we hold in mind when people are using our inpatient services that we make sure that that's a purposeful and meaningful admission for people.
Yeah, and the improvements in year 2 will be around knowing that we make that difference. So being able to measure and report on changes. So we'll use different kinds of evidence to help us to know. And the most essential evidence for each person is what they tell us about their own well-being, what's most important to them. And when we're collaboratively creating a care plan, the goal that makes the most sense to that individual. We'll use our outcome measures, for example, REQUAL, the Recovery of Quality of Life measure, quality of life being like improvement in well-being, and which maps onto the CHIME recovery model. CHIME is an acronym for connection, hope, identity, meaning, and empowerment. Connection and isolation are something that all of us have been forced to consider during lockdown, and we know that for our service users, as for all of us, having good relationships and knowing that someone cares supports all of our healing. The challenge of moving towards health equity and addressing inequalities in Sheffield is an important one. Our city is a fantastic place, steeped with Yorkshire values of being down to earth and speaking our minds. But socioeconomic and racial inequalities have created a gulf. In practice, a person-centred approach, the identity bit of the CHIME model can help us to focus on what matters most to people from each community. We'll be planning and delivering care based on an understanding of people's trauma history, including racial trauma, thinking about what has happened to them in their lives rather than what's wrong with them. Inequalities as a result of racism and poverty impact on many of our service users. To understand the CHIME factor of empowerment and disempowerment, we need to really see things from the perspective of the people who use our services. Creating services and care that is empowering and not disempowering lines up with the FREEDA human rights principles of fairness, respect, equality, dignity and autonomy. REQUAL's not going to measure everything that's important to our service users all the time. However, if we continuously evaluate the validity of this as evidence by checking how useful it is to each person who uses our services, we'll be able to see when that outcome measurement lines up with a person's journey and when, and more importantly, why it might not. Then in year 3, the improvements are going to be around creating environments for excellence, where we'll be ensuring our buildings are therapeutic and that they provide healing environments, and seeking accreditation for teams that promote good and excellent care.
So in year 4, we'll be focusing much more on transforming care in Sheffield, building further, faster partnerships and transformation with other organisations to become much more integrated as a health and care system and improve outcomes, including the suicide ambition that we have for the city as a whole. And in year 5, we'll be focusing on leading the system for outstanding care, developing our mental health and social learning disabilities, autism services right across the ICS.
So all of us are human. What we discovered in putting this strategy together is there's not one group of us with all the problems and another with all the solutions. For this strategy to be successful, we need to build on existing good practice, empower and encourage staff and service users so all of us together can collaboratively understand challenges and to co-create solutions.
So finally, Joan, I hope that this has inspired you, or at least inspired some curiosity to read more about our clinical and social care strategy, which is on our Jarvis site. And, you know, get involved, get in touch with us, get involved. We'd love to hear from you. So thank you, Mike.
Thank you, both of you. That was a really good presentation. I can't commend this enough. When we discussed it as a board and we signed this off as a board, you know, we were really impressed with the engagement, you know, the measurable outcomes that you were going to deliver, the fact that we were going to concentrate on what had happened to people in the past, not necessarily what's wrong with them now, and really understand that. So, you know, I can't commend this more highly. What I would say is we also want to use this as a model of good practice in terms of how we develop strategies going forward. The whole issue of co-production, listening to our service users and the various organisations that we work with and are involved with. So, you know, a really good piece of work, and something which will really drive our strategy going forward over the next 4 or 5 years, as you've just described. So well done. Can I just also make sure people understand, because you mentioned the ICS a couple of times. So that stands for an integrated care system. And this has been something that we'll talk at length about in next year's annual meeting, I'm sure, because a lot of the drive, or all the drive at the minute, is for us to work more in partnership across Sheffield, in terms of how we come together as not only health and care partners, but also the wider organisations that might influence, you know, health, particularly in terms of mental health, housing, education, jobs, and more. And we're going to work more closely through what's going to be the integrated care partnership locally in Sheffield. So there's a real opportunity for us to engage with those wider system partners across Sheffield for the benefit of Sheffield people, and more about that next year. So thank you very much, and well done, and thank you for the presentation. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to come now to questions. And we asked people to submit questions for us to respond to by a particular date, because that is easier in terms of conducting this meeting remotely. So we've had a couple of questions which are, I think, fall into 3 areas, and I'm going to invite Beverly and Mike to respond to these. So if I just read the first question, which is, I'm interested to see the discussion about the CQC report and to understand the Trust's action plan. So let's deal with that first, and I think, Mike, you're going to talk us through a response to that.
Yes, thank you. I mean, obviously, we're hugely disappointed to read the content of that report and to see that inadequate rating and talk about special measures, and disappointed because of what that meant for the care that people that use our services were receiving. We took the CQC report from April 2020 and the long list of must-dos in that report and turned that into a back to good programme and a back to good board to oversee the delivery of the programme. The programme was divided into a number of work streams focused on the really big and important themes that were captured in the must-dos that the CQC had revealed. For example, improvements on our acute wards, in our community services, a theme and a work stream about maintaining the highest professional standards, and also something about a theme about improving our therapeutic environments, as well as promoting much better physical health. So our workstream leads, under the oversight of the Back to Good programme and the Back to Good board, worked on that throughout the year. And as has been mentioned already, we were re-inspected, our core services, at the beginning of May, and then a well-led inspection at the end of May 2021 that resulted in the publication of a report from the CQC last month, where our overall rating improved to requires improvement, and we were rated as good in the caring domain. Obviously, we recognise that there's a lot more to do, and the report from August 2021, which again we'll be talking about what we've done with that at this meeting next year, but it sets out more for us to do, and we're on with it. We've brought that all together in an action plan and are working on it. We do recognise that, especially regarding our environments, inpatient ward environments and other environments, and especially regarding our learning disability inpatient services, there are significant and rapid improvements that we need to make. But as we did last year, we're on it with a plan. And I think last year we showed that we could make significant progress with this kind of approach, even under the very difficult circumstances of a pandemic.
Okay, thanks for that, Mike. And I would also add, for anybody who's interested, obviously the progress that we make in terms of delivering those action plans is monitored by our board. Our board papers and those reports that go to the board are available publicly on our website every other month when we have our public meetings. So for any of you who are interested in more of the detail, you can get that from our public board papers that are published prior to our board meetings. So hopefully for those of you who, or the person that raised that, if you want to access those reports and see how we're making progress, then you're more than welcome to do so via that route. Coming on to the second question, I would like to know more about the Trust support offer, particularly face-to-face and crisis support, as COVID becomes endemic in the community. And again, I think this is probably one for you, Beverly, to respond to if you can.
Thank you very much, Mike. So the most important thing, of course, is about keeping our service users safe at all times. And I did nudge to that earlier in the response to the quality account. To do that, we've made sure that we've had good availability and used the right PPE, that's protective equipment for all of our staff, that we've worked to keep a social distance where at all possible, and we have risk assessed any of the activities and interventions with people that use our services, and that of course includes face-to-face appointments and visits, which are noted in the question. Where face-to-face hasn't been appropriate, we have introduced new ways of working to ensure that we can continue to provide support to people. Lots of our services during this period have offered online appointments, and we've used a platform that's called Attend Anywhere, and we've also used Microsoft Teams. It's not for everyone, I have to say, but we have stood back and reviewed what service users think of us using this approach. And actually, many service users have told us that they prefer it. And so we will be keeping it going forward. However, for some people that use services, only face-to-face service will make a difference to them. So we continue to offer face-to-face appointments where that's necessary. Jan also noted we've actually increased our crisis services during this time. So we've gone to 24/7 offering crisis services, and lots of the crisis offer is face-to-face. We have also had additional investment in some of our services to support people who've been impacted by COVID. And one of those such services is our chronic fatigue service. We've also vaccinated people, and we have supported people to receive vaccinations from their own GP or from vaccination hubs in the city. And we've particularly worked with people with a learning disability or people who've got some kind of phobia or fear of needles and vaccinations, and they've needed that little bit of psychological support. So we're very proud to have helped people with that. We've also spent some time demystifying advice, so it's been very confusing, even for very senior healthcare professionals. So goodness only knows what it's been like for people who don't have a clinical background. We've provided an advice and helpline. And of course, I will just come back to that point that we have continued to see people face to face wherever it's necessary or because it's been a person's preference. Getting through COVID safely is one of our key priorities, and I must say that that is unlikely to change anytime soon. So we will keep focusing on it. We will keep taking the lessons as to how we've still managed to support people in this first year, and we will adapt what we do to provide the best care possible for every person, every appointment, every contact.
Thank you for that, Beverly. I hope that answers the question that the individual submitted. The final question was relating to there's continuing pressure on bed space, which will only increase. Has the board ever considered opening up geriatric hospitals, as of old, to help reduce waiting times in A&E and free up bed space for acute cases? They would become centres of excellence for geriatric care in our community, as they were in days gone by. Again, Beverly, I think this is probably one in your area of expertise.
It is. Thanks again. Thanks, Mike. We've worked really, really closely with Sheffield Teaching Hospitals and also with the local authority to do everything we possibly can to reduce any wait for services for older people, and particularly those people who might be waiting in the emergency department, or A&E, sometimes it gets called, in the teaching hospital. It's a really, really important question. As a mental health nurse and as a leader of mental health services, it's about how we get the right care to people quickly. And for many people, the right care is actually at home or as close to home as possible. So I was only talking to service leaders this morning in our older adult services, hearing from them a range of initiatives that ensure that we look at how we utilise our community and home treatment resources for older adults, so that as much as possible we can meet the needs for people at home. I think we all recognise that when you take an older adult in particular out of their home, it can cause distress and many difficulties. So we really are keen to see how we can utilise our older adults community services. We are really proud of our older adults community services, and in fact they have been recognised by the Royal College of Psychiatrists for their very good standards in community and home treatment care, and they have in fact been accredited by the Royal College of Psychiatrists. And I have to say they are absolutely up for the challenge of getting the best possible care to people at home or as close to home as possible.
Okay, thanks for that, Beverly. And obviously, some of us who've been around a long time remember those old geriatric hospitals. And yes, they had some significant advantages, but also it wasn't always the best care that we could provide. And the drive, as Beverly said, to keep people close to their home is obviously one. So a good focus. We've got a good track record, as Beverly says, in delivering some of this, and we'll continue to focus in on that. So again, that's the last of the questions. I'm going to close the meeting now, but I just want to close by thanking those of you who have dialed in, shown an interest in our annual meeting. I hope that you've found the information that we've shared with you informative and helpful. If any of you want further information, obviously go to our website. If you've got further questions you'd like us to respond to, we'd be more than happy to respond to those if you submit them to us, again via our website. But hopefully by the time we get to next year, we might be able to meet at least face to face or face to face but distanced, rather than doing these meetings, which are a really important part of our public accountability, rather than doing over Teams or streaming them. But who knows where this is going to go in the next 12 months. But just finally to say thank you for your support. Hope you found it interesting. Any further information, get in touch with us, and we'll be more than happy to respond. So on that note, I'm going to close the meeting, and enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. Thank you.